안녕하세요. 매일매일 운동하기를 실천하고 있는 동탄 왕호입니다. 오늘은 1월 3일 일요일이에요. 이제 연휴가 다 끝났죠. 크리스마스 3일 연휴, 그 다음에 신정 3일 연휴. 와, 진짜 코로나만 아니었어도 다들 놀러 가고 여행 가고 진짜 바쁜 나날을 보낼 텐데 지금은 아니죠. 다들 집에서 잘 쉬고 있는지 모르겠습니다. 어제 정부에서 2.5단계 연장과 5인 이상 집합금지 전국으로 확산했죠. 전국으로 확산이 아니고 전국으로 확대 적용했죠. 네, 그렇습니다. 저는 오늘 운동을 하겠습니다. 보시는 바와 같이 계속 스트레칭인가 그걸 했었고요. 그렇네요. 오늘 날씨 너무 좋았었는데 아침에 날씨 좋았었는데 갑자기 구름이 싹 꼈어요. 그리고 내일부터는 야간 출근입니다. 오늘 하루 쉬고 내일부터 야간 출근. 그래서 오늘은 아까 스트레칭 하면서 복근 운동을 조금 했고요. 그 다음에 이거 오랜만에 조금씩 들었고, 스쿼트랑 팔굽혀펴기 어저께 했던 조합이잖아요. 스쿼트 20개, 팔굽혀펴기 20개. 이 구성 되게 좋은 구성인 것 같아서 오늘도 이거 구성으로 한번 해보겠습니다. 역시 운동을 할 때 CNN이죠. 그거 스쿼트 할 때 그냥 안 하고 무게감 있게 커틀벨 들고 하겠습니다. 알겠지? 잠시만요.
Across Africa, businesses are working together like never before. All new on CNN, Connecting Africa.
Join me and Lenny Jokas as we crisscross the continent to show you how new connections between people, places, and projects are revolutionizing commerce in Africa.
All new Connecting Africa on CNN. In association with Bank.
죄송합니다. 운동하겠습니다.
To American politics now, where tensions are rising on several fronts. Okay, at least a dozen Republican senators now say they will vote against counting electoral votes next week. Congress is expected to certify President-elect Biden's victory Wednesday, but more lawmakers now say they intend to support an objection to the Electoral College votes, all based, of course, on false claims of widespread voter fraud. And on Saturday, a federal appeals court dismissed Representative Louis Gohmert's appeal of an earlier court loss. He and other Republicans had filed suit against Vice President Pence. They were seeking to force Pence to interfere in next week's vote count. Now, some Republican lawmakers are against all of this, and it's causing chaos within the Republican Party. CNN's Boris Sanchez is more from the White House.
President Trump getting welcome news on Saturday after confirmation that at least a dozen Republican senators are planning to object to the results of the Electoral College when they are certified by Congress on January 6th. The president had been campaigning for this publicly for some time, and now these Republican senators, led by Ted Cruz, are essentially saying that they want to look at the allegations of widespread election fraud, even though the president and his team have been able to provide any. Here's a portion of the statement from Cruz and crew. They write, quote, "We are not naive. We fully expect most, if not all, Democrats and perhaps more than a few Republicans to vote otherwise. But support of election integrity cannot be a partisan issue." We should point out those allegations of widespread fraud are coming from the president and the White House, and they've not been able to corroborate any of these allegations of widespread fraud. These lawmakers are calling for a 10-day audit to exhaustively review the results from multiple states. Clearly, their effort is not going to work, and they acknowledge it. They simply do not have the numbers, especially in the House of Representatives. Other Republicans are coming out against this effort, including Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and Pat Toomey of Pennsylvania, one of those states where there's a lot of debate about the results of the election, at least on the Republican side. Here's a portion of a statement from Senator Toomey released on Saturday. He writes, quote, "The evidence is overwhelming that Joe Biden won this election. Pennsylvania is easily explained by the decline in suburban support for President Trump and the president's slightly smaller victory margins in most rural counties. I voted for President Trump and endorsed him for re-election, but on Wednesday I intend to vigorously defend our form of government by opposing this effort to disenfranchise millions of voters in my state and others." Now, examining the motivation behind these 12 senators' objections, some of them are clearly trying to stake their ground for a potential 2024 run, including Senators Hawley and Cruz. Others may simply be doing this for survival. There is serious concern among Republicans about coming out against President Trump on the issue of an objection on January 6th. Just look at the way that he went after John Thune, the number 2 Republican senator, calling for the senator from South Dakota to be primaried over his dismissal of Hawley's objection. The president clearly still holds the reins of the Republican Party, and he is exercising that power in a way where establishment Republicans are clearly bending to his will. Boris Sanchez, CNN at the White House.
Now, that dysfunction Boris was just talking about in Washington could impact Tuesday's crucial U.S. Senate races in Georgia. Control of the chamber, of course, is at stake. Incumbent Republicans Kelly Loeffler and David Perdue are battling Democrats Jon Ossoff and the Reverend Raphael Warnock. Now, Warnock spoke with CNN earlier. He described the Republican push to overturn Biden's win as a new low, and he criticized Senator Loeffler for not denouncing it.
We have a democratic system, and the most powerful 4 words in a democracy are "the people have spoken." They've spoken all across this country. They've spoken in swing states like Pennsylvania. They've spoken here in the state of Georgia. And instead of standing up for the people and their voices, like these other dozen politicians, Kelly Loeffler's focused on her own future rather than the future of the people who are trying to survive amidst this terrible pandemic.
Now, meantime, high turnout for early voting in some of Georgia's Democratic districts has some Republicans worried. Not Perdue, though. Even though he was recently forced to quarantine after being exposed to the coronavirus, he says he feels he's in a good position.
The energy level is exactly where it was in November when the polls had me down 5 points. We won by 2. As a matter of fact, 52.5% of Georgians rejected Jon Ossoff and this Democratic and liberal agenda in November. Same thing happened in 2014. I don't put a lot of stock in polls. I look at this early voting, and I'm very confident with the president coming Monday night, the vice president coming Monday, and what we're doing with our team over the next 3 days.
Now, churches right across the southern United States have long held political sway over their voting congregations. And with Georgia's U.S. Senate runoff just days away, as we've been talking about, those churches could play an important role in the balance of power in the Senate. CNN's Kyung La has more.
집이 건조해서 그런지 숨 쉴 때마다 목이 너무 아파요.
The Georgia Senate runoff is front and center. Progressive and conservative Christian groups determined to move the faithful from the pews to the polls.
So we want to be ready, church, because the whole world is counting on us. to make the Senate blue.
At stake, control of the U.S. Senate. How important is the role of the church in these runoffs?
Oh, I think it is critically important. I think we saw in November there was a huge turnout among blacks, a surprising turnout for some. And I think the church played a major role.
It's important to note that we are in the South.
The black church is extremely strong in the South, and historically, the black church has led the effort for justice.
A passion the bishop believes will bring out voters for the two Democratic challengers.
Your standard bearers are the young Jewish son of an immigrant mentored by John Lewis and a black preacher who holds Dr. King's pulpit at Ebenezer Baptist Church.
Hallelujah. But this is the Bible Belt.
Right now, we're challenging our so-called evangelical brothers and sisters. We're challenging them to be better. We're challenging them not to hide behind something called pro-life.
And there is another major force of faith in Georgia's runoffs. This is Flat Creek Baptist Church, part of the Conservative Baptist Network.
We got a little election coming up. Vote Christian.
Head pastor, Reverend Josh Sethko.
We need to vote with the context of Scripture in our minds.
There's little doubt what that means to evangelicals.
Always vote for the candidate that most aligns with my Christian faith. And in this runoff especially, I'm voting for the candidates that are pro-life.
Reverend Warnock's pro-choice stance and his words from the pulpit, often taken out of context, have been the target of the fiercest Republican attacks.
Well, hello, Georgia!
Vice President Mike Pence has campaigned multiple times for Georgia's Republican senators, underscoring abortion.
David Perdue and Kelly Loeffler stand for the right to life.
A potent get-out-the-vote force for evangelicals, says his pastor.
I think it's advantageous for all of us followers of Jesus to elect people who represent our worldview.
You would like to see more engagement.
There's no doubt about it. We've become more engaged as a church family, so we can make an educated decision in the voting booth, but also being framed through Scripture.
Young Lost,
또 하겠습니다.
Atlanta.
Nathan Gonzalez is the editor of Inside Elections, and he joins me now from Washington, D.C. He is also the elections analyst for CQ Roll Call. Nathan, you called it. You are saying that one way or the other, this is going to be a historic week to start 2021 on Capitol Hill and in Washington. Set the stage for us. I mean, how peculiar and historic are these events going to be?
Well, yeah, before we get to Tuesday's races in Georgia and later with the Electoral College ratification, we have Sunday, which is swearing in of a new Congress, a very narrow House majority. There's going to be a vote for the Speaker of the House, which I expect Nancy Pelosi to win again, but I think it's going to be close based on the closeness of the two parties after these election results, and so it's quite a way to kick things off. By the time we get to the Electoral College ratification, it's going to be historic one way or the other. In the end, Joe Biden is going to be sworn in as President of the United States on January 20th. This letter by these Republican senators is, I don't see how it's going to work. I mean, fundamentally, when each state's electoral votes are going to be submitted to Congress, and members, as long as there are members of the House and Senate that agree to object, then there will be a 2-hour, up to a 2-hour debate on each state, but then the House and the Senate are going to vote. Democrats have the majority in the House, and Republicans have a narrow majority in the Senate, but there are multiple senators who have said that they are going to confirm the certified results. So all of this in the letter, I just don't see. I think it's a lot of gamesmanship or just trying to put themselves in position for the future.
But to that end, though, when you tell me how much of an impact you think this will have, you mentioned the fact that there's going to be debate on the floor about this. Does it not give an opportunity for those unfounded claims by President Trump to be front and center, as if somehow in the middle of the Senate floor, someone might be legitimately trying to claim that Biden stole the election, which everyone, legitimate and otherwise, in every state says he did not?
Sure. Yeah, I'm not sure. I think that will happen during a debate on the floor. I'm not sure that as many people are going to be watching the floor debate as have listened to the president for months, who has sown the seeds of distrust in the electoral process. I think that is probably that is the reason why. I just find it ironic that in the senator's letter they point to polling that shows that people distrust the process. Now, first of all, Republicans are the ones that are saying we should ignore all the polls anyway, and this is one of their fundamental things. But beyond it, this is going to come down to specific votes, by the House and the Senate after all the debate is over. And Republicans that want to overturn these certified election results just don't have the votes to do it.
And yet they will get that platform to carry this on. Now, Georgia on that platform is actually becoming a bit problematic, because it's as if Donald Trump coming here to do a rally just before Tuesday's election, it's as if he has to talk out of both sides of his mouth when he's here. In terms of how any of this will impact Georgia, look, it's definitely close. Will it all hinge on turnout, do you think? And how effective do you think either side will be in trying to get that turnout?
Sure, I think it's a cliche to say that it all comes down to turnout, but I think it's true. I'm not sure how many people are actually being persuaded. I mean, people who voted for the Republican senators in November are now switching, or vice versa. I think it does come down to turnout. Early voting has shown that turnout is high, but the key is how many Republicans come to turn out to vote on Tuesday. Democrats have the advantage, it looks like, on early voting, but Republicans could overcome that on Tuesday. And I think we have forgotten, because of this narrative that Republicans did so well in the 2020 elections, even though the president lost, that control of the Senate is on the line. This is not a guarantee. And it also we should also remember that what we were talking about earlier with the Electoral College and these Senate races are tied together, because actually Georgia Senator David Perdue's term ends, and he actually won't be sworn in. The Tuesday election won't be ratified and certified enough for him to be sworn in to have a vote on January 6th, when the Electoral College approval comes up. And so these are all tied together, but it's going to be a wild week.
Yeah, absolutely. And election night in America on Tuesday, literally the fight for the Senate on the line Tuesday here in Georgia. Could be a few days before we get results. Nathan Gonzalez, thank you. We'll watch it all with you.
Thank you so much.
Now, Israel is leading the way with coronavirus vaccinations, with more than 10% of the entire country getting the first dose of the Pfizer-BioNTech shots. The reasons why, next. Plus, Wuhan, China is getting back to normal after the coronavirus pandemic threw the city into the international spotlight. We'll talk about that coming up.
Election night in America continues. 2 Senate seats, 1 state decides. Will Georgia's runoff with the Senate? Election night in America continue. Coverage starts Wednesday on CNN.
This is the 100 Club, our look at companies that are 100 years old. The dark, cramped archives at Encyclopedia Britannica feel like hallowed ground.
We have business records and logs, minutes of boards meetings going back to the late 19th century. So it's really quite an array of a mirror, in essence, of the history of the West. Encyclopedia Britannica was founded in Edinburgh, Scotland in 1768.
In 2018, Britannica celebrated 250 years in business with a special anniversary edition, honoring the past, but still looking far to the future.
We feed off our past in order to get our momentum for the future, and that's very exciting.
I'm Selena Wang in Hong Kong, and this is CNN.
And welcome back to our viewers from around the world. I'm Paula Newton, and you are watching CNN Newsroom. And we have this just in. The United States has surpassed 350,000 COVID-19 deaths. That's according to data from Johns Hopkins University. That's right, 350,000 deaths. We don't want to gloss over it as a statistic. Each and every one of those deaths is a tragedy. Now, there have been more than 84.5 million infections worldwide since the pandemic began. The global death toll headed toward 1.9 million. British health workers are about to now reactivate 7 emergency field hospitals for COVID-19 patients. The new variant is threatening to fill intensive care units past capacity. And today, Saudi Arabia is lifting its ban on travelers coming into the kingdom. The ban was put in place because of concerns over the variant. People from nations where it was detected will have to present a negative PCR test, among other rules. Now, Israel's health minister says there could be more restrictions to come since new COVID-19 case numbers are at their highest level in nearly 3 months. That's even though Israel has one of the most impressive vaccination programs out there right now. Elliot Gotkin reports.
힘들어.
2 weeks in, and Israel has already administered vaccines to more than 1 million people. This out of a population of just 9 million. And there are 3 main reasons. First and foremost is healthcare. It's universal, it's cheap, and the HMOs know how to reach out to their members and even to pluck out at-risk groups and the like to prioritize them. It's also set up for big events such as this vaccination campaign. Second is politics. It's in the government's interest to vaccinate people as quickly as possible, not least because there are elections coming up in March. And finally is geography. This is a small country. The population is pretty centralized. So logistically, it's much easier to vaccinate people here than in a country like the United States. Elliot Gotkin, CNN, Tel Aviv.
Now, just over a year ago, the world's focus, of course, zeroed in on the city of Wuhan, China, where an outbreak of a mysterious illness was spreading. A year later, there is still so much we do not know about the coronavirus. But the people of Wuhan have, of course, persevered after enduring months of sickness, lockdowns, and, of course, that awful stigma of being the location where many believe the virus began. Life in Wuhan is gradually returning to normal with no recorded cases of transmission, community transmission, that is, since May. Think about that. Businesses now are trying to rebound and people are starting to enjoy mixing together again at social events. But questions, of course, remain. The World Health Organization is set to visit the city this month. They'll be asking, why did the virus take hold here and what, if anything, can be done to make sure it doesn't happen again? Yuli Yang is a former resident of Wuhan and the founder of the Go Wuhan campaign. She previously worked for a number of media organizations, including right here for us at CNN, and she joins me.
이거 운동하고 나면은
saying it is great to see you.
앉아서 공부만 할게요.
Many of your family
영어
members
공부해야지.
still live in Wuhan. Kind of just describe what it's like there now. We've seen some of the pictures, but
숨이 안 돌아옵니다.
what's it like for your family the year on?
Thank you, Paula. I know that, as the world is still struggling, in your previous reporting, as mentioned, on this virus, especially with the new strands, it's kind of hard to imagine, but it's true that life is basically back to normal now in Wuhan with my friends and family and the residents in Wuhan. People have been back to work for months now. Kids are back to school. Traffic are back on the street. Obviously, in this new normal, we have masks, we have temperature checks everywhere.
숨이 돌아왔습니다.
We have to scan QR codes for contact tracing purposes. But there is this real sense of safety.
마지막으로 20개씩 하고 끝내게.
But of course, amongst family and friends, people still pay extremely close attention to any news that's virus related, especially domestic news. And if there's any important stories, people spread those very quickly through the social media, like WeChat apps, to their friends. And there is especially close attention put on the elderly, wanting to make sure that they're nowhere close to any danger.
Yeah, I can only imagine, having gone through what the city went through, that community vigilance is actually quite important. You know, I remember seeing those first pictures out of Wuhan and thinking, wow, what a strict lockdown. How can they do that? How can these people endure this? And yet here we are now. The people at the time seem to have so much fortitude, given that they really had no idea what they were facing, right? It was back in the beginning when we didn't know much about the virus. I mean, how did they get through it, really?
I know, now thinking back, it really felt that those were some of the darkest days that I can remember for my own family, for my friends in Wuhan, really. Like, thinking back at the beginning of the year when Wuhan all of a sudden got into lockdown, it felt like time all of a sudden stood still. And it felt like the city was under attack by this invisible attacker, that's the coronavirus. And we had very little knowledge of how exactly to protect ourselves fully from this virus. And also we had zero idea about whether any of this is ever going to end. And that's really terrifying. And for example, you would basically have no idea whether